Donald Trump, apparently out of frustration, is starting to threaten China with canceling his visit to Beijing at the end of this month. If China does not join the war against Iran and does not send its warships to the Strait of Hormuz for a joint military operation with the Americans. In addition, Donald Trump has already stated that he plans to announce this week the creation of a coalition of countries that will seize Iran's strategic oil island called Karg by military force. But the thing is, most of Iran's oil goes to China through this very island. Moreover, Trump's visit to Beijing is less important to China than it is to Donald Trump himself. That's why China is simply waiting. And as Donald Trump likes to boast, saying that the United States of America has huge oil reserves and that blocking the Hormuz Strait doesn't bother them at all. So for China, this is even less of a problem, since Beijing has stockpiled enough oil for at least 6 months of a complete supply cutoff. But a complete cutoff isn't happening. First, Iran continues to supply, and second, Trump himself did a huge favor for agriculture. I'm not talking about but also in China, the oil that China doesn't get from Iran, it gets from Russia. My name is Pechiy. Let's discuss this topic together, but before we start, I ask you to subscribe to this channel, like this episode, and leave any comment under this video. Also, subscribe to my channel, Pechiy News. The link to it is in the description of this video. There we publish breaking news as it comes in. So, US President Donald Trump recently stated that America is discussing with other countries the issue of patrolling the Hormuz Strait. He made this statement during a conversation with journalists on board the presidential plane Air Force One. And there he also stated that first and foremost, China should join his war against Iran because it is China that needs it the most. He said the Chinese are the most interested party, but for some reason they haven't joined the war yet. Here's the quote. If you look at what I said years ago, I was asking why we are guarding the Hormuz Strait when it's actually needed by China and many other countries. Why aren't they doing it? In my opinion, the reason was weak leadership, to be honest. And I believe that's exactly where other countries should be helping us. The journalist asked how many countries are actually involved in this, what kind of coalition it is. And then Trump replied that about 7 countries are involved, but he didn't specify which countries exactly. And here's another quote from him. Just remember, we don't need this. And those countries don't necessarily need it either. Over the years, it has become a kind of habit. We did it, and we did it very well. Let me explain what Trump means here. Trump is hinting that the United States of America has constantly been carrying the burden of security in the Middle East, while others have simply taken advantage of it. And in general, Americans never needed this. Why did we get involved in it? He says. And that's why it's better to let the Chinese, Europeans, and other Asian countries handle security in the Middle East. And let me remind you that the Hormuz Strait it's an important route for the global economy because about 20% of the world's oil supplies pass through it. Iran has effectively blocked passage through the strait after the US and Israel attacked its territory. Because of this, oil prices have risen to $106 per barrel, which is about 45% higher than before the fighting began. And against this backdrop, against the fact that the Europeans refused to help Donald Trump, I talked about this in the previous episode, so go back and watch it. Against this backdrop, the US president threatened to postpone his meeting with Xi Jinping, which was scheduled for the end of March if China doesn't help with unblocking the Hormuz Strait. And you know, that was the most ridiculous threat I've heard lately. Well, excuse me, but here you can only shrug your shoulders and say, I don't even know how to comment on this. Because it's actually in Beijing's interest right now to do nothing and just watch Donald Trump's struggles, who not only provoked an economic crisis, which is hurting the Middle East and the West the most, but not China, and is also trying to undermine the North Atlantic Alliance, NATO, from within, which is the main geopolitical antagonist for China. Because Trump is already threatening to break up NATO if European countries do not cooperate or join the war on the side of the US. And the Europeans, particularly France, Germany, and Britain, have already told Trump that they will not send their warships to the conflict. They say, we didn't start this war. Then the question arises, why should China do anything at all right now? It's more beneficial for them to simply let Donald Trump carry out his threats and break up NATO. China has a very large margin of safety here. You might argue, listen, Alexei Pechiy, but China itself suffers from the blockade of the Strait of Hormuz because it doesn't get Iranian oil. But, first of all, China still gets Iranian oil because Iran manages to partially export its oil to the market. Secondly, over the past 6 months, China has been actively pumping oil into its storage facilities, buying up surplus oil from the entire market. And in this way, China has created its own strategic reserve, which would last for 6 months in the event of a complete and total shutdown of oil imports into the country. And thirdly, Trump has already saved China, because it was Trump himself who lifted the sanctions on Russian tanker oil, giving Xi Jinping the opportunity to buy Russian oil instead of Iranian oil. Xi Jinping is now in the most advantageous position. He'll fly to him in Beijing, and to hell with it. Moreover, Xi Jinping already knows very well that when Donald Trump starts making threats, you just need to wait until American farmers start saying that they have nowhere to sell their agricultural products. For example, the same soybeans they once sold to China. You just need to wait until American voters start expressing dissatisfaction because of rising gas prices and so on. Xi Jinping has no reason at all. Right now they're afraid of Donald Trump's threats. When he says, "I won't come to the meeting," Xi Jinping will say, "Well, to hell with you, don't come for God's sake." You'll come later anyway, and Trump brought this on himself. The White House is still acting like everything is fine. US President Donald Trump is working on building a coalition of countries to open the Strait of Hormuz, which was blocked by Iran, writes Axios. According to American officials, Trump is also considering the possibility of seizing Iran's critically important oil storage facility on Karg Island, if the tankers remain blocked in the Persian Gulf. And it's important to note that as long as the blockade continues and oil from the Persian Gulf isn't leaving, Trump won't be able to end the war, even if he really wants to. As a result, Trump and high-ranking administration officials held phone conversations and worked on creating a multinational coalition on March 14th and 15th. In particular, on March 14th, Trump discussed these efforts with the British Prime Minister Keir Starmer, even though he had previously insulted him when Starmer offered help. Let me remind you, Trump recently stated that it's too late to help great America. And besides, Starmer is not Churchill, so he shouldn't try to take credit for the US victory over Iran. But not a single country has publicly taken on any commitments yet. The White House said that the main task now is to at least ensure political agreement, just so that, for example, Belarus. The British or the Germans said, hypothetically, we basically agree to such a coalition. The White House admits, they say, we just need to get at least this kind of agreement. Вот. And the question of who sends what and when, they say, can be discussed later. The countries that agree to the coalition, as stated in the White House, will be asked to provide warships, command and control assets, drones, and other military equipment. But wait, Trump said they have everything, and they don't need any help. So why would he need, for example, European ships, command and control assets, drones, and so on? For example, he said that he doesn't need drones from Ukraine. Then why is he asking for them? I just can't understand this logic. Supporters of Donald Trump, I know you watch my shows. I have some really passionate Trump fans who always write in the comments that they're ready to, worship him. So write in the comments, where's the logic in that? Trump, a few days ago, Trump said he already defeated Iran. That's the first thing. Second, he said Americans have everything, the best weapons, all advanced, and don't need help. Why would he need it now? So Trump wants to announce the creation of such a coalition this week. Once again, no one has agreed. And here, the US president insists that China take on commitments to participate in this coalition. And he did this before Trump goes to Beijing for a summit with leader Xi Jinping. And if supposedly China doesn't agree, then Trump won't go to Beijing. And Trump also warned NATO allies, quote, "If there is no response, or if it is negative, I think it will be very bad for the future of NATO." At the same time, the US continues to strike targets in Iran, focusing on the coast of the Persian Gulf and Karg Island. This is a strategic terminal more or less about 25 kilometers from the coast of Iran. In particular, Trump announced on March 13th that He ordered strikes on military facilities on this island, but not to touch its oil infrastructure. And on Saturday, Trump stated, quote, I was just listening and thinking, is this really the President of the United States speaking? So, Trump stated on Saturday, quote, the United States might carry out strikes a few more times just for fun. And so, as Axios reported, one official said that Trump is actually attracted to the idea of completely capturing Karg Island, because it would mean an economic knockout for the regime. Basically, it would deprive Tehran of funding, but this step would require troops on the ground. And it could provoke retaliatory strikes by Iran on oil facilities and pipelines in the Persian Gulf countries, particularly in Saudi Arabia. That's why Trump needs help from those he was humiliating and insulting just yesterday. I'll leave it at that. Share your opinions and conclusions in the comments below this episode. Subscribe to the channel, hit the bell, and don't forget to like. And I'll also be grateful for any support you can give, whether it's a donation, a paid subscription, or sponsorship on YouTube. All the links and details on how to do this are in the description of this video. That's all for now. Take care of yourself. Goodbye, everyone.